the dclessons.com, which is presenting module 0 of the Cisco Nexus Data Center products. In this module, we are going to learn about all the data center products which the Cisco is providing on the Nexus part, like Cisco Nexus 7700, Nexus 7000, Nexus 5500, and Nexus 9000 switches. These all switches are used in a different architecture, like in a 3-tier architecture or a 2-tier architecture or a single-tier architecture. First of all, what's the data center architecture all about? So the data center architecture all about, it contains the following component. It contains the network infrastructure, that means all your Nexus switches, right? It can be in the core, it can be in a distribution, it can be in an access layer, right? So after that, we have a storage infrastructure. In the storage infrastructure, the Nexus support FCOE, it also support the FC, right? And the same, the Nexus switches can perform all these operations. In the computational power, we can talk about the UCS, right? Because the Cisco is providing the UCS chassis, which is used as a compute server to provide the virtualization environment. End user and applications computing, management systems, operating systems, and server virtualization technologies. Security infrastructure, we can talk about a lot in like firewalls, like load balancer, etc., and the desktop virtualization solution. So these all different infrastructure, it forms a complete data center. So in a nutshell, a data center comprises of the network infrastructure, storage infra, computational power, application and using computing, management system, operating system, security infrastructure, and desktop solution. So if you club all these, right? So if you club all these, it forms a complete data center solution of any enterprise level. Now, in this environment, or in this module, we will only talk about the network infrastructure, and in the mainly we will talk about the Nexus switches, which this Cisco is providing. So in the Cisco portfolio, there are lots of Nexus series environment. If you talk about the recent one, Cisco has introduced Nexus 9000. After that, Cisco has introduced Nexus 7700. After that, they have a 7000 series switches. Then they have a combination of 500 and 5500 switches. And then they have a combination of Nexus 2K. So these are all switches which are available in the Cisco portfolio of the Nexus Cisco Network Data Center. So if you talk about what's the Nexus 9000 series switches, right? If you talk about a very small overview, so the Nexus 9000 switches, they act in a both NXOS mode, and now they also works in a ACI mode. In the ACI mode, we will talk about more in our ACI classes. But yes, if you want to provide the application in a centric environment, you can use your Nexus 9000 with the in the ACI mode, so that you can implement the ACI. In the Nexus 9000, we have a very different switches, model switches, like 9504, 9516, 9508, and 9300. So these are all, and in the Nexus 9300, we have a lots of different models. These 900 switches, they act as a spine switch and leaf switch, depends upon the models which you are using. So the Nexus 9000, they works in a switching platform for the application centric infrastructure. They support up to 1.92 terabytes switching capability. They provides the 1 gig, 10 gig, 40 gig, and now 100 gig connections methods. It works in an NXOS mode and in ACI mode, as I already discussed. The Nexus 900 series, it provides the VXLAN bridging, routing, and a gateway support. Why? Because VXLAN is the base for ACI. So if your switch doesn't support the VXLAN bridging routing, then in that case your ACI will not going to work. So for the base of the ACI, your switch has capability to work on the VXLAN mode. Now if you come about the Nexus 700 switches, the Nexus 700 switches, I mean, it act as a core, right? It acts as an aggregation layer also. In some of the environment where we have a single single tier architecture, then we can use the Nexus 700 as an access layer also. So for that, we can use different types of line cards. And in those line cards we can directly connect our server and virtualize and compute environment. So it is used as a data center access layer, aggregation layer, and core layer deployment. But mainly we use Nexus 7K as a core layer. It provides capacity up to 1.3 terabyte per slot, right? And it provides the advanced services like high availability, in service software upgrades, VPC, fabric path, OTV. So these are the traditional technologies which the Nexus 700 provides. If we talk about the VPC is a enhancement of the port channel. If we talk about the fabric path replaces the STP. If we talk about the OTB, with the help of OTB, we can extend our layer 2 environment from one data center to the another data center, irrespective of any transport we have. It provides 1, 10, 40 gig and 100 gig scalability. Now, if you talk about Nexus 600 switches, it is morely or lessly used in a environment where we have less space, because they are not big in size. So if you want to have a switch in your environment and in your rack, there is a very less space, you can use the Nexus 600 switches, 6000 switches, sorry. Now in the Nexus 6000 switches, there are mostly two models, 6100 and 6200. And in these two models, they are mostly used as a fabric interconnect. So what is fabric interconnect? Fabric interconnect is a switch which is used in the UCS environment. So if you have a UCS chassis, the fabric interconnect will be used to connect your UCS environment. And from the so this is called as your fabric interconnect. So from the fabric interconnect, you can connect your a Nexus 500 or a 5500, or you can either connect your Nexus 7K. So it depends upon your environment to environment and your design to design, right? It also supports the VXLAN. It also supports the NVGRE, right? So they are NVGRE capable switches. It can connect the fabric extender, right? It also supports the FCOE in the LAN and SAN conversions. So basically, what I have seen mostly in the data center environment, Nexus 6000 switch is used as a fabric interconnect of the UCS. Now we'll talk about the Nexus 500 switches. Nexus 500 switches, they comes in a two models. One is Nexus 500 and second one is Nexus 5500. In the Nexus 5000, there are two models. And in the Nexus 5500, there are lots of models. So if we talk about Nexus 5500, so we have a Nexus 55048P, 5548UP, 5596UP, 5596T. So what do you mean by UP? UP is a unified port, and it can support both your LAN and SAN packet. And what is T? T is mostly used as a RJ45. So if you have an environment where you are using a RJ45 cable, Cat6 cable, or a Cat7 cable, you will use 5596. In this also, right, it supports the 10 gig, 40 gig unified ports, fiber channel and FCOE. Right, it supports in both layer 2 and layer 3 feature. So by default, Nexus 5500 comes as a layer 2 module. So it is a purely layer 2 switch. But if you want to make it as a layer 3, so you have to connect a layer 3 module, separate layer 3 daughter card in its expansion slot. So once you connect the layer 3 module in one of its free expansion slot, your switch will become a layer 3 switch. Now then you have to enable the license and make it and use it as a layer 3 switch. Nexus 3000 switch is mostly used for Python scripting, energy efficient Ethernet, and the XML management tools. So it it is mostly used as a comprehensive SDN solution. So it supports the OpenFlow, Cisco 1PK, right? If you it acts as a white box switches. If you are having a traditional SDN controller, and it's working on the OpenFlow protocol, so you can use your Nexus 7 Nexus 3000 switch as a access layer switches, because it supports the OpenFlow and any open standard controller like ODL, ONOS, which supports the OpenFlow southbound protocol to push the policy to the to your access layer switches, or to make the flow control flow table of your switch. It can be used. So it's mostly, and because it is used in SDN solution, so it supports the mobility supports and tenant isolation with the VXLAN. Nexus 2000 switches is mostly used as the top of rack. So we can say that Nexus 2K is the uh, it acts as a line card, right? So it acts as a, or we can say as a remote line card, right? And it can be used in both 7K and 5K. In 7K, some of the line card doesn't support 2K. It doesn't support 2K. So before you are going to connect your 2K to the 7K, you must check the data sheet of that line card, whether that line card supports the 2K or not. Else, you will be going to connect your 2K, but your 2K will not come up, right? So all the remote management, configuration part, and everything of the 2K will be handled by its parent switch, which is a 7K or a 5K. It's mostly used as a access layer switches to provide 1 gig, 10 gig, or a 40 gig capability, right? It's mostly connected, or situated into the top of the rack solution. So where you want to have a top of rack solution, right? If you want to optimize the inter rack cabling, if you want to reduce your cabling cost, you can use 2K. It supports both LAN and SAN deployment. That and now now in this section we will talk about how Cisco unified data center product such as Nexus, storage, UCS are placed in different layers of the Cisco 3-tier architecture. So basically, if we talk about, there are 3 types of Cisco a defined architecture, which is a single layer architecture, dual layer architecture, and a 3-tier architecture. So we already know about the 3-tier architecture. We have been learning once we entered in the networking domain or a data center domain. We are already aware of that. But let's talk about some detail on all these parts. So what is Cisco DC products in the single tier Ethernet architecture? Single tier architecture means we will have only one tier of the switches that will act as a core switch, distribution switch, or we can say aggregation layer switch and access layer switch. So you can use Nexus 7000 switch both as an access layer and a core layer connection. So if now your question will be, how my Nexus 7K will be acting as an access layer? So see, your Nexus 7K it is a modular switch, and you have lots of options to connect a line card into it. So Nexus 7K comes by a 4 chassis, 9 chassis, 10 chassis, and 18 chassis. So in different slots, you can connect your different types of line cards like F1 line card, F2 line card, F2E line card, F3 line card, M1 line card, M2 line card, and make it as an access layer. So basically, if your F1, F2, F2E cards are act as access layer switches, because M1 and M2 are mostly layer 3 switches, and they are very efficient enough. So mostly for the layer 3 routing and other stuff, we use the M1 line card, right? If you don't want to use Nexus 7K as an access layer and a core layer, you can use a Nexus 5500. It can be used as a core layer, but if you are using a Nexus 5500 as a core layer, then you have to put a L3 daughter card on the expansion slot of the Nexus 5500. Then only it will work as a layer 3. But if you do that, it will act as a layer 3, but it will not support any advanced features like MPLS. Right now, if you are using any of the Nexus 5K or a Nexus 7K, right, in act as a core layer, and you want your extension of your LAN, you can use 2K either with the help of 7K or either with the help of 5K. So 2K can be used as a top of the rack solution, and you can connect your 2K with the 7K and a 5K. It is just an extension, nothing else. But for the sake of the single tier architecture, 7K and 5500 can be used based on your design. Now we come about the dual tier architecture. In the dual tier architecture, we have a what we can do, we can merge the core layer and the aggregation layer. So we say as a collapsed core, right? In this scenario, we can use Nexus 7000, which act as a both aggregation and a core layer connection, right? And for the, so you can use it Nexus 7K as a core layer and aggregation layer, and for the access layer, you can use Nexus 500 or a 5500 for the access layer connection, and then you can connect it Nexus 2K as an extension, right? And either, and also you can also use the next MDS 9000 switches, multi-layer switches used for a SAN connection at the storage core layer. So if you have the storage SAN environment, and if you want to use the Nexus MDS 9000 switches, so you can use MDS 9000 director class switches at core layer. And what's about the Nexus 3-tier architecture? Here in the Nexus 3-tier architecture, we have a different layer like core layer, distribution layer, access layer, right? So in the access layer, we can use Nexus 5000 and 5500 switches with the help of 2K, right? And we can use Nexus 7K as a core layer and a distribution layer. And in this, we can use different type of method like VDC. So one of the VDC will be core and another VDC will be your distribution, and this VDC will be connected to the access layer, right? And the core will be providing a layer 3 connectivity, and the distribution layer will provide all your policies, security policies, routing policies, and other stuff, right? So same 7K with the help of different VDC, we can connect it at a core distribution, and in the access layer, we can use a Nexus 5000 and a 55,000 along with the 2K. Right? So these are all different types of architecture which any architect or any designer or any operational admin can use in their data center environment, right? So in the nutshell, if I talk, what are all the Cisco Nexus data center product? So Cisco Nexus data center products comprises of Nexus 9K. In the 9K, we will have 9500 model. In the 9500 model, we have a 9504, 9508, and we have a 9516. In the again 90, it has a 9300 switches. In the 9300 switches, we have a different type of Y93108T, different types of modules. Then we have a 7K. In the 7K, we have a different types of models like 7700. We have a 7000. If I talk about 7000, then we have a 7704. We have a 7009. Then we have a 7010. Then we have a 7018. Then we have a Nexus 5K. In the 5K, we have a Nexus 5000 switches. And then we have a Nexus 5500 switches. In the Nexus 5000 switches, we have a Nexus 5010. We have a Nexus 5020, which are, now out of sale. In the Nexus 5500, we have a different models like 5548P, 5548UP, and then 5596UP. We have a 5596T. In the 2K, we have a different types of models. I'm not going to take much. Then again, we have a Nexus 6000 switches, which is act as a fabric interconnect switches, a Nexus 3000 switches, which is mostly used, as a in an environment where we have an open flow type of protocol running with the help of, open SDN environment, like if you have a ODL, right? If you have a ONOS as a controller. Now after that we talked about all the three types of Cisco data center architecture, like single layer architecture, two-tier architecture, or a three-tier architecture. So with the all these types covered, we completed this module, right? So thank you for watching the DC lessons module 0 Cisco Nexus Data Center product.